Thank you for joining us today. My name is Max Ofusu. I am a labor studies student here at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and today I have the pleasure of introducing to you someone who I think will be very interesting. Please welcome Ms. Cara O'Donnell.
Thank you. Hi Max, how are you?
Pretty good. Thank you for joining us today. I hope your commute wasn't difficult.
No, it wasn't bad at all.
Awesome. So I guess my first question to you is, what is a public defender?
So I am a public defender. A public defender is a criminal defense attorney who represents folks who are accused of crimes and who, based on their income level, qualify for publicly appointed lawyers. So if you've ever watched a cop show or Law and Order or something like that, and you've heard them say you have the right to an attorney, if you cannot afford one, one will be appointed to you. A public defender is who would be appointed to you if you couldn't afford to hire your own attorney.
So that's covered in the Constitution, correct?
It is, yes.
Awesome. So my second question to you is, what got you interested in this position?
So I think I started way back when I was a little kid. I was pretty opinionated and I was happy to speak up for myself and other people around me. So I've been hearing pretty much my whole life that I should be a lawyer. But as I got older, I think I struggled a lot with this idea that we're all equal under the law, we're all created equal. And then I looked around at the world I lived in and it seemed that people were certainly born into circumstances that were very different from mine and had to deal with difficulties and challenges that I never had to deal with. And I had a real hard time sort of reconciling those two ideas, that if we are all created equal, then why are some people having to deal with things that I never had to deal with? And as I got older and older, I sort of realized that I was never going to be able to reconcile or justify that. But maybe I could find something, a job that I could use the opportunities that I had had and the abilities that I had acquired to help people that maybe didn't have those opportunities or had to deal with things that I had had the fortune to not have to deal with. And so I started looking for fields in the law where I could maybe help someone and maybe work with people that were dealing with challenges that I'd been lucky enough to avoid in my life. And so in law school, or in college actually, when I knew that I wanted to attend law school, I participated in a couple of pre-law groups and a mock trial team, and I actually saw a presentation by a couple of public defenders, and a lot of what they were saying really resonated with me. They were really passionate about their clients and really were sort of feeling like they were in the trenches, really fighting for justice, and that was all really attractive to me. So I started trying to learn more about what being a public defender would involve and how to do that. And as a part of the mock trial team, I met a gentleman who was about to graduate from law school to become a public defender. And he introduced me to his dad, who happened to be the president of the Public Defenders Association in Florida. And after speaking with him, he helped me seek out some internship opportunities. So between college and law school, I worked for about 8 months for a public defender's office in Florida. And it probably took about 2 days before I thought that this is something I really want to do. This is a place I want to be. So I went into law school knowing that that was probably what I wanted to do, and I really focused my studies in law school on trial practice classes. And at Boston College Law School, where I went, they have a clinical program where you can actually practice essentially as a public defender for your final year of law school under the supervision of lawyers, real lawyers. And so I had that opportunity and I loved it. And that really cemented for me that once I graduate, this is definitely what I want to do. And lucky for me, I was able to get a job in the area and I love it. It's really worked out. So it was sort of a long journey to get to this particular place, but I think all of the pieces sort of fell into place and really I ended up in the right place, getting to do the things that I wanted to do and work with the people that I wanted to work with, and so far it's been great.
That's pretty good. So do you have an area that you specialize in, like particular clients that you...
So no.
Okay.
we obviously, the one thing that our clients all have in common is that they're dealing with poverty, because they have to be almost in order to qualify for our services. But beyond that, I try all different kinds of cases. My clients have anything from minor offenses like shoplifting or trespassing, all the way up to more serious things like burglaries and robberies, and I don't try murders yet, but basically anything else I'm qualified to litigate. So there isn't a field of law that I'm particularly focused in, other than obviously criminal defense law, but in terms of in a prosecutor's office, they might have prosecutors who focus on, let's say, sex offenses or property crimes or white-collar crimes or domestic violence type things. But in our office, we do all kinds of things. And I think that's great, because there might have been some areas of offenses that I may have shied away from, but now that I've gotten to meet clients charged with those things and work on those cases, I found that I really don't have an area that I don't like to do. It's great because it makes you maybe get out of your comfort zone a little bit, but it also helps because I think sometimes if you focus too much on one area, it can become really exhausting and really overwhelming. Sometimes it's nice to have a break from some of those more serious things and try things that are a little less serious or a little less heavy, or the facts are a little more easy to understand or easy to relate to. And so I feel really fortunate that I've been able to do things in all types of cases. And I believe in Massachusetts that that's pretty typical, that most of the public defender's offices throughout the state, that they're not necessarily specialized. There are certainly private attorneys who specialize in certain areas of the law, but we do everything, and I have just about one of everything in my caseload at this point.
So on a macro level, how are cases assigned when it comes to caseloads?
So a person is either arrested for a crime, or they're sent a summons in the mail and said in order to appear in court.
Yep.
And when they get to court, whether it be in the custody of the police or if they show up on their own, they're interviewed by the probation department. And if it's determined that they fall into a certain income level or below it, and that they want to have a public defender appointed, then they qualify for counsel. And basically, whichever public defender is on duty that day in that particular court gets assigned their case. Now, I work there are about 30 lawyers in my office. So in order to manage people's caseloads and things, sometimes I may be the lawyer on duty that gets assigned a case, and then I come back to the office. It may be reassigned to a different lawyer in my office, but generally, it's sort of whoever's assigned to that court on that particular day represents all of the people who happen to be arraigned on that particular day. So it's sort of luck of the draw in a lot of ways. We certainly don't get to control what types of crimes we're assigned or which clients we represent. It's just kind of by date and by who happens to be in the court on that day.
That's good. So as we spoke on the phone, I can sense the passion in your voice, and I can tell this is something that you really, really enjoy doing. For someone like me who is studying criminology, I find that passion to be very, very inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
And I just want to thank you for being so passionate and doing your job well. So my next question is, what is next in the field?
Do you mean for me, or for what am I seeing sort of changing in
The
in
changes
the
that you're seeing, yes.
So I think I've been working in Worcester is where I practice, and all throughout Worcester County, and I've been there now for 4 years. And even in the 4 years that I've been there, I can see a pretty significant change on a couple of things. I think probably the biggest changes that I'm seeing are in the way that the courts and the judges are dealing with people who are dealing with substance abuse issues or substance use disorders. I think they've really made, especially in Worcester County, they've really made a conscious effort to try to start focusing more on treatment. And not even just treating the actual addiction, but all of the mental health things and the circumstantial things in our clients' lives that lead to these substance use disorders, rather than just incarcerating people.
Yes.
Certainly, some judges are more progressive on those issues than others. Some prosecutors are more progressive on those issues or more understanding of them. But I have seen a real shift, and I think we have a long way to go on it, but I think there has been a real shift in trying to recognize that just punishing people for what is really an illness over and over again is not productive. No. It's certainly not productive for that person, and really it's not productive for the community at large, because the incarcerating someone isn't curing that issue or whatever's underlying that issue. And so as soon as they're released, these folks are back out dealing with the same things and often suffering the same consequences over and over again. And I think there really has been a shift in trying to address those things in a more meaningful way, a more thoughtful way, really engaging the individual clients, or the defendants as the court would call them, and really saying, what could we do to help you and help better your situation? I think in my position, I feel like it's really important to try to educate myself on those issues, and not just formally, but also to really talk to my clients and try to understand the circumstances that they're in and what got them there. And I can tell you that I would say probably at least of half of my caseload is dealing with some sort of substance use issue. And they've come to that place from so many different places. I have clients who maybe didn't use a single substance until they were 50 years old, and then they got into a car accident, and they were prescribed a medication, and when the prescription ran out, now they're dealing with an addiction issue and they don't know how to deal with it. Or I have clients that are 18 years old and they've been using substances since they were 10, 11, 12. And dealing with both of those people, they may have sort of arrived at the same place, but if you don't figure out how they got there and how to address those issues, the likelihood that you're going to be able to really help them where they are now is not very good. So it's talking to clients, it's trying to constantly educate all of the other people in the court, because I think also I have the luxury and the privilege of getting to speak to my clients and learn more about where they're coming from. The prosecutor, the judge, probably the probation department, all the other people that are involved in the case don't have that luxury. And so they tend to have to rely on the police report about maybe the worst thing my client's ever been accused of doing, and maybe their criminal record, and a lot of times that's it. And it's my job to make clear to all those people that that's not all that this person is. They're not the worst thing they've ever done, and they're not just this criminal record. They're a million other things. And I think that's part of it, is making all of those other people see my clients as people and realize that they're complicated and they have histories and they have families and they have goals and dreams and fears, and just like we all do. But I think it's easy to lose touch with that if you're only reading a police report, right? That's all you know about my client. So it's educating the judges about the path that my client has taken to get here, and then really trying to understand what we can do for each individual person that might help them to get out of those circumstances. But I think the good news is that the conversation is headed in the right direction. Judges are recognizing that just putting those people in jail isn't helping. We've got to come up with a different plan. And a lot of them are open to what that plan might be. And so it's talking to them and being open with what's going on to the extent that my client's willing to. And I think also learning, like I said, about what each client may need. For some, it may be, this isn't probably a drug issue at its root, it's a mental health issue, and if they were receiving the right mental health treatment, and if they could have some assistance in obtaining that and accessing those resources, then the substance issue might go away. For some people, it's that if they could deal with homelessness, they'd be more likely to, if they just had some stability in their housing situation, they could probably deal with some of this stuff on their own, or access the resources on their own. But when they're having to go to the shelter every day and figure out how they're going to get their next meal, addressing all of those issues that underlie their substance use is just not realistic. And so it varies so much from person to person, but being able to have that conversation with my client and then convey what we can convey of that to the judges and prosecutors, I think, is helping to move that conversation along. And I know that the different prosecutors' offices and the different counties have really done a lot to try to educate judges and prosecutors about treatment options and what to look for and how to really help each person. So I hope that that's a direction that we're going. I think, like I said, we have a long way to go on it. I think we have a long way to go in mental health issues and folks who are dealing with those types of things. A lot of my clients are dealing with mental health difficulties and challenges and often don't know how to access resources. And unfortunately, the criminal justice system becomes that point of access for them. But at least it is a point of access, and if we can really, again, have those conversations and try to connect them with those resources, that's a positive thing. But I think the reality is that very few of us in the field are educated in mental health.
That's true, because you can also see it in like movies and like television and like how people with mental illness are treated.
Absolutely.
They're often like looked at as if they're violent or dangerous, but
absolutely. And you can imagine that for many people, for all the people involved in the court system, for most of them, that is their source of education, right? They didn't go to school for it. So whether they are fully aware of it or not, a lot of their judgment of people who are diagnosed with some sort of mental illness or something else, they're basing their judgment of that person on the characterizations of that stuff in movies or TV shows or whatever else. And obviously, those are usually oversimplified and over-dramatized and just not a real reflection of how my clients are feeling or behaving. And so if that's the lens that everyone's seeing them through, it's sort of my job, along with my client, to say that that's not fair, that's not a real representation of who this person is, and then to advocate for better treatment, a more fair disposition. But I think, unfortunately, what ends up happening, because I'm the first to admit that's not my background either. I went to law school. I was a criminology major in college. I didn't study mental health. I certainly didn't go to medical school. And yet, it often falls to me and my colleagues to identify mental health issues, to say something's not right here, and hopefully to get someone involved that is better informed, and then through that person to better inform the court about what my client is going through. I think we have a very long way to go in that regard, but I hope that as more information comes out, as a society, as we better understand what people are dealing with, we can do a better job of informing the court and hopefully getting better resolutions or dispositions for our clients. But it is unfortunate, because I think it often falls to people who have no business diagnosing my clients to sort of diagnose them to try to figure out what we can do next or try to help them to access the services that they need. So I think those are a couple of areas where I do see positive progress, but I think we have a lot of work to do. I think it's hard for the court to take off its court hat and put on the public service hat or the hat to treat illnesses, or because I think ideally that wouldn't be who's doing it, right? Ideally it'd be dealt with people with medical backgrounds or mental health backgrounds or even social work backgrounds, people who are better informed and better educated and better prepared to deal with it. But unfortunately, our clients often have a difficult time even knowing where to start to reach those people. And so we end up being that starting point for them. And the hope is that we do a better job of helping that be an access point rather than those folks just continuing to fall through the cracks. And so I think there's good progress being made. People are working hard to try to make it better, and hopefully it keeps moving in that direction. But I think there are a lot of places where it's difficult. And I think we're lucky in Massachusetts, though there are people that are really involved in our criminal justice reform movement here in Massachusetts that are really trying to think about those things as well, and think not just about, what is the crime and how do we write it and what punishment should be imposed, but also what types of circumstances lead to people even being involved in the criminal justice system in the first place. And then how can we deal with those issues? Because I think they find that that's a much more effective way of reducing rates of crime than waiting till they're done with their jail sentence and then going, you understand now, don't do any more crimes. That's probably not a realistic way to deal with it. So I think they're starting to get it, but obviously I think we have a long way to go on those issues.
That's pretty interesting because, well, you seem to be really close to your clients, which means that you have a manageable caseload.
Yeah, and I think I'm really lucky. I've had excellent supervisors at my job who have been really willing to touch base with me on a very regular basis about my caseload and how I'm feeling. And it's hard, I think, if you're just managing it by how many cases do you have. That doesn't really, it's hard to fully grasp what that really involves, because you might have a client who it's really easy. You're going to probably resolve the case on the first date. It's going to be something that they are happy about. We can get rid of the case. It's quick. Then you might have the next case, and it might be low-level offenses like trespassing or shoplifting or something that maybe you could work out a resolution. But you meet that client and you recognize that there's some deeper issues going on. And luckily, my caseload does allow me, and I think my office demands of me, to really try to get involved and try to see what else that client may need. It's not my job to get them things they need that they don't want. We try to really focus our work on this client interest-driven work. So the client has to be interested in the services, but if they are, then I think it's a duty of mine to try to do everything I can to help them, whether their case is that involved legally or not. But then again, you might get the next case and it has 100 legal issues and the client doesn't want anything to do with any mental health treatment or substance abuse, and they may not have to deal with those issues or difficulties. So every case could vary a lot on what type of work it needs and how much work it needs. So I've been really lucky in having supervisors in my office who really pay attention to my caseload and check in with me when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed, or asking me about what's going on in all my cases and do I need help in certain areas and things like that. So I do feel like my caseload's been pretty manageable. It can be emotionally overwhelming sometimes, more than just the workload. I think the workload has been pretty tolerable and I've been pretty capable to manage the workload while I've been there, but because I do get really close to my clients, it's hard not to take on some of the difficulties that they're dealing with.
So how do you manage that? Like, do you exercise or like?
I do exercise, not as much as I should. I think one way is that, like I mentioned before, that there are 30 lawyers in my office.
Yep.
And we have a pretty good group of people. We get along pretty well. And I think that that's a huge benefit to me, because I can come back to my office, and if I'm just totally overwhelmed by the day, or a client got some really hard news, or things didn't go the way I'd hoped, I can come back and sort of vent to these 30 other people or whoever's around that day. And they know how I feel, and they know what I'm going through, and they often have really good advice about, like, oh, I dealt with something like this before, and here's what I did next, or did you think about trying this, or just someone that says, that's terrible, I know how that feels, and tomorrow will be better, hopefully. And so I think that's a big thing for me, is that I felt really lucky to have people that really understand the work and understand how hard it can be some days, and are willing to help when I am feeling overwhelmed. If there's something that they can do to sort of take the pressure off, they're happy to do it, and I think that's been awesome. I think that it's important, obviously, to have people outside of my office to talk to, not about my specific cases, but just about how I'm feeling and processing through all of that. I think exercise is a good thing. Doing other things that just aren't work is always good. But I think the biggest thing for me is also to just keep reminding myself that this isn't about me, right? If I'm taking it hard, imagine how my client is feeling. And sometimes that can help me to really process through things, that it doesn't do anyone any good for me to be feeling bad about this and I didn't do it's okay, this is where we're at, and what do we do next to try to make it better or try to help them deal with whatever happened. and being productive and trying to move the ball forward ends up, I think, making me feel better than just sort of wallowing in a bad court decision or feeling like, and I think it helps too if you know that you just did everything you could do for that particular client. At least you have that at the end of the day, and I think that that's where, and you might not have gotten the resolution that you hoped for, and it might not have worked out as well as you had hoped, but if you really did everything you could do, you can kind of rest on that. It's hard to do. I think that's where the people in my office come in to say, you know, Cara, you did this and this and this and this and this and this and this. What else could you have done? And if you can really, at the end of the day, say, no, I agree, there really wasn't anything else I could do. I just wish it turned out better. At least there's some peace of mind in that. Sometimes it's hard to remember that, but, and I think the other part of it is just that my clients are awesome. They're the most amazing, resilient people. The things that some of my clients have been through, and they still are joyful and funny and interesting, and they still can dream and hope despite having gone through incredibly horrific things. I don't know how you interact with those people every day and you don't feel motivated to keep working for them and with them and keep trying to do better the next time. And I think that I always say that my relationship with my clients is sort of both the best and worst thing of my job, right? Because it puts a lot of pressure on me. I feel responsible for what happens to them, and I feel really invested in things. And if it doesn't work out for them, I feel terrible about it. But it's also those same clients that get me through every day and make the next day easier to get into.
So for someone like me who's studying the law and looking to get into this field, do you have any advice?
Absolutely. I think what helped me find my way here was being vocal about what I was passionate about, talking to other people who had similar interests, reaching out to people in the community who are doing this type of work and hopefully enjoying it. I know I've had several people reach out to me about shadowing me on a day at the job. That's something I'm always interested in helping somebody do, or coming to court and just watching things. It can help you get a feel for who is doing the work and who seems to be good at it and who seems to be really enjoying it, and then just trying to engage those people in a conversation. I think, as you might guess, lawyers love to talk about ourselves and our work, so reaching out to people and just trying to get a feel for what they do and maybe the steps they've taken to get there. Obviously, you know, internships or experiential things that you can do to try to educate yourself about it is great, but I think just talk to people who do it and love it and try to figure out maybe different ways that they've all gotten there. But I think the more that you talk about things that you're passionate about, those people will also sort of find you and seek you out, and hopefully together you can come up with a way that you can get involved in this. And I hope that you will.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for the advice, and I also thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching at home. We will see you soon.